Geneva.
All right, guys, ready to start? Sweet.
Nice. It's pretty, isn't it? It's really pretty.
Welcome to this panel. I'm Alison Mann. I'm VP of Creative Strategy at Sony Animation. We have Natalie Nourigat. She is a cartoonist and writer from Portland, Oregon. After graduating from the University of Oregon, she drew comics and created commercial storyboards at Telescope Studios. Natalie has collaborated with great companies like Marvel Comics, White & Kennedy, Nike, Image Comics, Oni Press, Lombardi, and Dark Horse. Her work has been nominated for an Eisner Award, GLAAD Media Award, and Oregon Book Award. She's directed the short film Exchange Student, which will premiere at Annecy. She's very sick, and she's here,
Yeah.
and she's alive, and just came back from on a train ride, right?
Yes. I have a cough drop in my mouth. I'll try not to make gross sounds. Sorry.
No, make the gross sounds. It will engage them. Next, we have Elizabeth Ito. She is a 15-year veteran of the animation industry. She has worked for many different studios on the TV, feature, and commercial projects. Her many credits include supervising director on Adventure Time, feature storyboard artist on Hotel Transylvania, Astro Boy, and the SpongeBob movie. In 2017, she won an Emmy for directing Adventure Time. Elizabeth is currently working at Netflix and developing City of Ghosts, a hybrid documentary-style show about ghosts who live in Los Angeles. Woo. Anything you want to add? That's good?
No, you did a good job.
All right. Moving on to Jill. Is a 27-year veteran of animated feature films. She had made a career as an animator in both 2D and 3D formats, a character designer, visual development artist, storyboard artist, head of story, writer, director, executive producer. Anything else you want to add? Her credits include Toy Story, A Bug's Life, and Toy Story 2, for which she designed the beloved cowgirl Jessie. She's currently in production at Dreamworks Pearl Studio, filming Abominable. God. As a writer, director, Abominable is set to premiere September 2020.
Yes.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about intergenerational perspective on belonging. So the makeup of the workplace today is very different to that of the past in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, attitude, and behavior. Because of this, it's important that diverse perspectives and voices are included in any setting, including our creative space, in order to foster a societal culture of patience, appreciation, and understanding. So, audience, I need some participation first. By a show of hands, who have felt more engaged, willing to challenge yourself, and more open to change at work when you have a sense of belonging? Raise your hand. Now, how many have quit their job when they haven't felt and went to another company? Really? You guys all stayed even if you didn't belong? All right. So our objective with our time today is to discuss the importance of diverse perspectives among generations and what working together means today in the animation industry. So our first question is, belonging is the invitation that unleashes the breadth of human potential. Do you feel you've been invited to help influence and make impact in your area of expertise? Why or why not? Jill, you want to start off?
Sure. I think, as Alison said, I've been in this industry for almost 29 years, actually. And I feel like at the beginning of my career as a storyboard artist and an animator at Pixar, I really did feel a sense of belonging there. I have to say, as one of the few females there, I felt like the company said, you know, we need female perspectives here. We're so glad you're here. That's in story and in animation. And I do feel like it's been kind of an interesting journey as my career has progressed. And I feel like once I reached the level of director, things changed a little bit for me. And I think instead of asking other people, you know, do you think I belong here? I had to start asking myself, do I belong here? And I think that difference is kind of important because as a female in this industry, if you become a director or you get into the higher positions, honestly, sometimes people are waiting to answer that question. They're a little more skeptical. You might have some support singing, yes, you belong here. You might have some people waiting to see if you belong there. And so I think I had to start answering that question for myself and saying, do I have enough experience? Yes. Do I have the talent? I hope so. I think so. And then, is there a need for more diverse voices in this industry? And the answer is yes. So then you say, hell yes, I belong, right? So that's how I answered that question for myself.
Fantastic. And how about you, Elizabeth?
I mean, I would say, like, I mean, my experience is a little different than that. Like, I think someplace like Pixar, like, I didn't necessarily see that as someplace where I was being invited. It kind of felt more like it would be a challenge to try to get hired there for me personally, just because my sensibilities and everything, like the things that I like to do, the kinds of things that I think are funny, the kind of storytelling I like to do, I think it really took a while for me to figure out where that was going to be, because sort of that part of me is a little bit different than what traditionally is aimed for in like a lot of the studio spaces. So I think it was just looking for those opportunities where I did feel a sense of belonging. So it's a combination of like being invited to be on a project that had something that I could contribute to it, but also just recognizing when it wasn't the right fit, which I guess happened a lot at the beginning. It's just figuring out like, oh, this isn't the right type of project for me. So I think it's like, it's a combo of you have to kind of search for what you know you're good at or what you identify with, and then yeah, just getting better at recognizing where that is.
Nice. I have the least experience out of this table. I've only had a job at one studio and then freelance. But yeah, I felt like I didn't belong because I didn't go to like the right school. I didn't go to an art school, and I didn't break in until I was almost 30. And when it happened, I was like, oh, are you guys sure I belong here? Are you sure? I'm pretty sure I don't belong here. So it's been a pleasant surprise the last 4 years, really.
Do you guys tend to, I mean, you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but waiting for other people to kind of decide for if you belong, and then getting to a point of, yes, I do belong? Like, Natalie, as somebody who's just breaking in, like, has that been a struggle for you? Yeah, in some ways, you know, showing up at a studio the first day with somebody who just graduated from CalArts and they're doing the handshake like through the hall, like half the people they meet, oh, you know so-and-so? Oh, yeah, I taught that class, I remember you. And I'm like, hi, I come from comics, you know? But yeah, that doesn't last forever. And I feel like I've been learning on the job instead of learning at school. So I've been, you know, storyboarding for almost 4 years in the studio, but there will still be like a term that comes up or a camera movement that comes up, and I have to be like, what's that? But people are nice about it, so it's still possible to learn on the job. Do you guys feel like when you're having a sense of not belonging, maybe, how much of it is it projecting out and then projecting in? So is it more of like imposter syndrome on yourself and something that you have to overcome, and no matter what stage you are at your career, or is it building confidence over time where you've seen enough and you're like, I know who I am and I feel secure in that? And then if it is that, how long did it take you to kind of overcome and feel that confidence?
I can say that just to echo a little bit of what Elizabeth said, I think as I've been in the industry longer, I do feel like, for me, it's been really important to find the project that I relate to, a story that I know I can tell strongly, something that has elements within it that maybe echoed my own life, so I can be an authority with that story. It's not as much about studio for me as it is story, and I don't take that lightly, because I find family with the studios that I have worked with, and I've worked with many, but I think it's really important to because these films last so long, at least in feature, they do, it takes 3, 4, hopefully not too much longer than years, to do. So I think those studios do become your family and your support. So I think it's important to be on a project like that, but for me, I've found that I have to be in a place that I feel like I belong and then claim that for myself. And I think because there will always be people who, you know, whether you're female or male, but I think it has been more challenging for females, that will look at you and kind of wonder if, you know, make you question yourself. And I think you can't go through your career, especially in this industry, questioning that. You have to know inside your gut and tell yourself, yes, I feel like I belong here. I'm going to stake my claim and work hard.
I mean, I think I like always have imposter syndrome. So it's sort of like just finding people to work with who know how to inspire confidence in you rather than making you doubt what you're doing. I think that's like the key, really, is that the people who are around you believe in you. Like even sometimes when you don't know if you can do it, like that's been sort of the most important thing that's really allowed me to find the projects where I was able to grow and get that feeling of belonging, I think.
Yeah, definitely imposter syndrome. Well, I like to treat each, project that I work on as a learning opportunity. So there's kind of a way to positively foster the imposter syndrome, like, oh, what am I going to learn this year? Let's use this as an opportunity to get better at these 3 things I don't think I'm great at yet. Surrounding yourself by supportive people, and also trying to help the next generation or people who are a little bit less experienced than you. It really, for me, it puts it into perspective, like, what did I want when I was in that position? What can I give them to make it easier for them? And then try to talk to myself with the same kindness that I would talk to somebody in that position.
So kind of echoing of what you guys are saying, and it touched a little bit on of what you guys were talking about, but what are common misconceptions people have around belonging at different career stages? And how can we combat these misconceptions and communicate more effectively? So I think some of the solves that you just mentioned are good, and like how do you bring people along for the ride? So what are things that you've seen in different stages? And then even as a student, I think that could be part of your career as well.
I think for me, it's been asking a lot of questions. It's like, I don't think you have to be 100% qualified at any given stage. So for instance, when I made the switch from animation into story, I knew nothing about story. So I just asked a lot of questions, and I found mentors within those departments that I could go to and ask and have them look at my work and critique it. I think that's really important at every stage, whether you're writing, directing, that you have to have kind of confidants around you who will give you straight feedback and criticism that maybe are aside from the studio or maybe within that department, but off to the side. You have to support yourself with friends. So,
Allies.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
allies.
I think there's something really true about raising people up who are maybe at a lower level than you, and just figuring out how to bring them up and foster what they need to make them better. I mean, that's really vague to say, but I think, yeah, I mean, for me, like right now, it's like I'm working with people who are first-time directors on my show, and I think it's just giving them the knowledge that it's okay, you're going to make some mistakes, and it's going to feel like you don't know what you're doing at the beginning, but just sort of like figuring out how to help them be directors and just like what they need, I think. Yeah, like just kind of helping them to figure out what to do, and maybe like reflecting on what did you kind of need when you were in that same spot? Like, how did you learn to do that? Because you don't kind of just know how to do it. So yeah, just figuring out how to help people.
Yeah. When you're the one in that position, find as many allies as you can. the artist manager who really, has your trust and who you can vent to or ask questions or express, what you want in your career without fear of it spreading around or like judgment or anything. Or, I had an amazing experience working with a head of story, Josie Trinidad, who recognized that some people are introverts, but they might have a great idea. They don't want to stay in front of 20 other people. And, someone like that, she can come to you individually after a meeting and say, what did you really think? That kind of thing. And then when you're not in that position anymore, but you have control over, someone else's experience, just to try and remember as much as possible about what it felt like and make it better for them.
And so as we're finding our tribe and getting our allies, our mentors, we're becoming leaders, we're trying to figure out what does a leader mean. Do you ever mask or downplay any aspect of your physical, cultural, spiritual, or emotional self at work?
That's an interesting. I think.
And go.
Yeah, I was gonna like. I would say sometimes yes, and I think that I feel like I'm a fairly emotional person, and I go at a lot of my job with that kind of passion, and I think oftentimes I just have to keep a bottle on some of that, or I'll fall apart in a mess at work. But I do feel like it's okay to have that passion and to actually be honest with it, because I think when you do kind of share how passionate you are and emotional towards a certain subject, it tends to really resonate with your crews. And I would say that's also important just in this conversation that we're having about the feeling of belonging, is that I think sometimes when you make it about the passion and the work and you try to take it away from a little bit of that personal insecurity, if you can kind of dive into the work and always make it about the work, and that's whether you're a mentor or someone who is being mentored, just about being better at your craft, better at your skill, and talking about the story or talking about that skill set, whether it's layout or storyboarding or animation, then I think really you're just helping people to grow in what they truly want to do, what their passion is. So I would say we shouldn't be afraid of it. Have I been afraid to show some of that before? Sure. But the older I get, the more I think it's actually kind of a power of yours if you can wield it, your vulnerability in the right way. It doesn't have to make you feel like someone who's weak.
Finding your superpower.
You're right, right.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's taken me a while to figure out that vulnerability isn't a weakness, and like showing emotion doesn't mean that you're irrational or anything negative, really. It's actually better because it kind of lets people understand something about what's important to you and just that you have feelings. And like it's not necessarily better to just be a robot. It's just a different way of being, but that it can help to allow people in to kind of see that. I think it allows your crew and just people around you to feel closer to you and that they understand what you're trying to do better.
I guess what comes to mind for me is health. Physical health. As a storyboard artist, if you develop carpal tunnel or tendonitis, some people don't tell their supervisor because they're worried that they're going to be seen as, having a cap on their potential, when they really need to tell somebody and get help and like have a little bit of leeway with deadlines. Mental health for sure, which affects a lot and is a part of who we are, but doesn't feel like something you can just walk into a room and say, I feel great, I'm seeing a new therapist, how are you?
You don't want to share that with the world? Do you feel like bringing vulnerability helps though with the storytelling? I think as stories are developing within our industry, I think the accessibility and the authenticity of who we are, no matter what stage you are in your career or what your age is, becoming a huge importance to the development of our animation community. Would you guys say that has been in your experience, and do you feel like it's helping evolve our storytelling as well?
I would say definitely. I think as we've kind of been saying, if you show your passion towards the area that you're in, whether it's animation, storyboarding, or storytelling on a bigger level, people want to work for people with passion. I think that's the thing, is they want to hear the vision, they want to be part of the vision. The more they know about the vision, the more they feel like they can contribute, because they're trying to get on board with that. And I think if you don't let people in, the downside of that could be that they just are working and they're kind of phoning it in. And what you want to do is instill passion for a whole crew, right? Whether it's your story crew or whether it's your entire crew. I think that instilling that passion and the vision actually spreads that kind of feeling in the crew, and they get excited too. So there's no downside to that.
I mean, I think you have to be vulnerable in order to create really unique projects. So if we didn't do that, then I feel like you would just keep getting kind of formulaic stories. I mean, which sometimes can be entertaining and work, but I think the truly original and heartfelt stuff, like, people recognize when you've allowed yourself to let that out creatively. So I think it does make a big difference as far as like the variety of projects that we'll see. Like if people are allowed to appreciate that, then I think it'll just only benefit the types of projects that we see.
Yeah. Well, certainly to work with other people, it's nice if you're seeing a larger part of who everybody is and feel comfortable being yourself in the room. But even in terms of the work, like Elizabeth said, it's the complicated stuff, the sticky stuff, that's the really juicy story stuff, the stuff that's difficult to talk about or that you don't normally see on screen. That can be a really good place to find something unique or very emotional for your story.
And I think that plays a really huge part, like being able to bring your perspective into the story and like not feel like what you're doing doesn't have any weight or value. I think sometimes we play a part of, I've only had this much experience, so my voice shouldn't be heard and I should just be sitting in the back. But I think in essence of the way that our community is broken down, it's so important that all of us come to the table and all of our ideas are being heard. In every culture, generations cycle through periods of optimism, skepticism, prosperity and recession, war and peace. Those cycles shape generations everywhere. Since our jobs have global reach, and even more so as the platforms for communicating and sharing our what we're creating is growing, how do we build a more inclusive community work environment that allows us to be authentic to who we are?
I think that's in supporting each other and really being okay to hear different kinds of stories and be open to that. And I think sometimes that's not always easy to be open for different kinds of storytelling, but I think we have to be, because like you said, things change in the world. I remember when Harry Potter came out, it felt the war was going on at that point. There was a lot of families, kids that felt unempowered, and I think a movie like that where children were empowered and they didn't listen to the adults, they went rogue, and they ended up saving the day. That was a message that was resonant at that time. So I think we have to be open for what's happening in the culture and the time and listen to the voices that are part of that or experiencing those things. So I think it's important. One thing to say, too, it's not always easy being vulnerable, and I think as a woman, I think it's important to say this, is that, this movie that's coming out in September is an original idea of mine, which has a young Asian girl with a violin and a Yeti that does magic, and sometimes pitching something like that makes you feel like everyone's going to think this movie is for 2-year-olds. So I think that's important to say, is that sometimes when women pitch something that's more emotional, I feel like sometimes the audience or the studios feel like it's automatically going to skew young, and so I think you have to keep your vision and keep telling it strongly and with passion and get the story ideas across. But I would I would be lying if I didn't say sometimes that's a challenge.
I can see that.
I mean, I don't know if this answers your question, but I mean, I was thinking, like, I guess it's just making sure that we're looking at stories and voices that maybe aren't aren't being lifted up yet, or just sort of like there's not enough inclusive media out there for everybody yet. I mean, I think we're making headway, but I still think there's a long way to go as far as like looking at everybody who kind of wants to tell a story about themselves and see themselves represented. Like, it's still very limited. So I think it's just being really conscious of that and sort of like allowing, not only like looking for those stories, but also looking for those people whose stories they are, like, so getting more of those people in storyboard and director positions where we have more of I guess just a more diverse range of who were like letting helm those stories and whose voices were really lifting up.
I agree with both of them. I would just add making sure that you're still exposed to a lot of things beyond just animation. Excuse me. Making sure that you're exposing yourself to theater, to books, to the news, to everything. So, oh my gosh.
Natalie.
Excuse me, thank you. That'll have to do for my answer, I'm sorry.
You don't want to keep going?
I'm sick.
We'll give you a break.
Thank you.
So as far as like kind of looking back of where your career is now, and if you could go and give yourself advice to younger yourself, it could be when you were 8, it could be when you were 16, whenever you first decided this was your career path, what advice would you give to yourself?
For me, I'd probably say to believe in myself more. I felt like a little bit, I was always preparing, but never thought I was ready. And I think what you realize now looking back is you're never fully ready. You learn because you dive in, then you have to learn. That's what makes you grow. And so I think what I would say to my younger self or to people here is never think you're too young to have a great idea. Never think you're too young to dive in and do something great. Don't wait too long, because when you finally have confidence, then you realize your career has 15 years left maybe. So I would say dive in with all your gut and try to find that confidence within you or find it from the people around you. But don't let the fact that you're not fully ready for something stop you.
I do find that from talking to people throughout my career, and that's what I do is talk to people all day long, and a lot of them will often wait for a studio or a company to validate them as a creative, and oftentimes their work is so good and their ideas are so good, and sometimes it's like, just go out and do it. Like,
Right.
don't wait for that validation, and like find that inner confidence and that inner drive to tell your story. And I think everything else will kind of follow. And I think to that point, it's like sometimes it's hard to know where you might be overstepping or what you're supposed to learn or do. But I don't know, like.
Let me give a dumb, super corny analogy, but it stuck with me. I had a mentor once tell me, because I was sketching. She said, are you going to make a book with that? Or are you going to try to, turn that into a show? And I said, oh, no, I'm not ready. I'm still working on this. I'm still working on it. And again, excuse me for the corny analogy, but it has a good visual, and it's well represented. She said, what part of a rose is the prettiest part? What phase of a rose is the prettiest? And I said, I don't understand. She said, is it when it's a bud and it has all this potential? Is it when it's at full bloom, right before the petals fall off? She said, every phase of a rose is beautiful, and you need to realize that everyone has to grow and change, and every stage of that has its own beauty. So don't be afraid to claim that,
I guess I would tell myself, don't worry if it didn't work out the first time for every single thing you do. You fight really hard, and so eventually things will work out really well, but you just have to be patient, and it doesn't, for example, with CalArts, it took me 3 times to apply and then finally get in. But the first time I was devastated, but then it finally worked out. And it's actually the same with developing shows. Like I've tried to develop shows a couple times before this, and it didn't really work out in the end. But I think for the better. Like I don't think if I think about those shows having gone at the times when I was first developing them, I don't know whether I would have ended up working on something that I really loved at the end of it. I mean, that's not to say it couldn't have worked out, but I think it's worked out pretty well having waited for this opportunity. So.
Nice.
How are you feeling, Natalie?
Okay, I'm gonna try it slowly. Okay. I would tell my younger self to do things that I really care about instead of chasing what I think is going to work or what I think other people are going to like or what I think is popular. The projects that I've worked on that have the most enduring satisfaction for me are the ones where I thought, nobody's asking for this. I don't think anybody wants this, but I really want to make this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I would just tell myself earlier, like, do that. That's going to take you in an interesting direction.
It's kind of that bringing it back to the authenticity of your own voice and like doing stuff that's maybe not for yourself. I think there's some importance to that. Did you feel like when you were starting, I know for myself, sometimes ignorance is bliss. So when you start off and you don't know any better and you don't have the habits and you don't know all the humans, that might be really intimidating, that you don't have the self-consciousness of like, oh, well, that's already been done. So, or you just don't know. So you're willing to kind of try out everything, and and then you get further in your career and it's almost like, oh, I can't say that, or I can't do that, or this human's in the room, and like all those kind of the ignorance bliss of, and it's almost like being like a toddler. It's like you don't, in the beginning you just don't know, and you're willing to try, and like everything's an experiment, and then all of a sudden it all changes, and you become your sense of self comes through. And then, I don't know, maybe you get a little bit further in your career and you're like, well, I've done all the bullshit now, and so now I can go back to where I started and have more of like take more of risks and like be more confident. So how has like each stage, like, have you experienced that?
I mean, I definitely have. I remember I had a sketchbook at Cal Arts, and it was my first sketchbook, and I used to go, to the zoo and sketch in public and go to cafes, and I was thinking, this is great, this is the beginning of my career, and wow, these drawings look pretty good. And then I saved that sketchbook because years later I look back and I'm like, these are terrible drawings. And I let people see them, like, because I didn't know they were terrible. And but that ignorance is bliss. It kept me going. It gave me drive to keep going because I loved it, and because I couldn't see how far I had to go, I just kept going, right, until I finally got there, I should say. The other side of that, when you said, then you advance in your career and you start to worry, I remember someone telling me it's almost like you're crossing a train trestle and you're walking across those rungs, and the higher up you get, the more vertigo you get. So you take, your steps get a little shakier. I think that's an interesting phase because you feel like I have far to fall backwards, and yet how do I move forward? And I think that phase is a little bit of a trap because you start to think about a little bit what Natalie was talking about, what other people think I should do, as opposed to what you authentically feel you are drawn to. So I think if you keep asking yourself that question and not saying, well, they're giving me this career choice and it could advance me on a show that I hate, you should say no. And just have faith that, as Elizabeth said, that the right opportunities will come along.
How do you say no thank you?
And not burn a bridge?
Yes.
I think there's ways to do that elegantly, and I think even, again, going back to the vulnerability and honesty, saying, you know what, I want to have passion for everything I work on, and this project I just feel like isn't the right fit for me. But thank you so much. Please keep in touch. I mean, I think there's ways to let your honesty about what is you're drawn to actually help you in having that conversation.
I mean, I would say ignorance is bliss, kind of. I think, right when I got out of Cal Arts, I don't know whether I expected the struggle to be so real about, getting into the industry and just what it's like working in the industry compared to being in school, where you're just coming up with your own ideas and making your own stuff. And then just the disconnect between like everything that you don't know yet when you go into working, like just practically speaking, you don't really know how to run a TV show, you don't know how to direct a feature, because like who would know how to do that unless they've tried it? So I guess it's like that thing where you kind of feel like you know where you want to be, but you're not there yet, and seeing that gap is kind of I don't know, it's just a thing that you don't really realize until after you've worked for a while, and then you think, oh wow, like now I've got some experience. And I think like, yeah, reflecting back, like if I think about what it would have been like for me personally, like getting a show right out of school, like I think I would have lost it, because it's just so much, it's so much work and so much stuff that there's no way to be prepared for that.
Nice. I really relate to that feeling of being able to see where you want to be, or how you want to be able to draw what you want your skills to be, and feeling like the despair of the distance between you and there. But the good news is, when you feel that, that means that you know where you're going. Like, you can see what's lacking, and that means that you're going to be able to achieve it. Like in art, when I'm super content with the way that I'm drawing, I'm not improving very much. But when I'm like, oh, why can't I draw like that? Those are the periods when I'm actually going to start learning very quickly, because I'm looking for a new way to do things, and I'm looking for what I'm lacking. I think I would just add, like, life is long, so it's okay to not get your dream job right out of school, and there's nothing wrong with having life experience. I found out, what storyboarding was when I was 21, and I was already like, oh, all of my college funds are spent on a business degree from the University of Oregon. Okay, I guess I'm not going to work in animation. And I took a very roundabout path to get here, but I'm grateful for that, because those experiences are still things that I use today, and nothing is a waste of time if you can learn from it.
And so with kind of that in mind, and maybe some actionables that people can kind of take back, and we talked about mentorship as well, but what are the most critical changes that we must make to face the future effectively in supporting individuals at different stages in their career life, or in life in general?
I think it's interesting, because we have to look for opportunities to mentor, and I know there's a lot of programs starting off right now, especially women in animation, women in film, to grant opportunities to be mentors. But I think sometimes folks that need mentors are shy to ask, and I think those of us who maybe could be mentors sometimes are busy and don't think, because somebody's not asking for help, we don't go and say, would you like to have lunch, or something like that, to make those connections. And so I think it goes both ways a little bit, but I think that having great mentors around you, and that's men and women, by the way, it's important at every phase. I have mentors right now, in my life as well, people who are willing to read scripts and tell me how terrible it is. And I'm so grateful for that, right? So I think that mentorship, both directions, is really important.
I guess it's both the mentorship thing, and then for me, I won't stop talking about what it's been like to become a mom and working, and I think allowing for just people to have families, and women to be able to have kids, and still have stuff workable for them, like where they can still go back to work if they want to, and not sort of making it feel as epic as it felt when I had to go back to work, which it wasn't that long ago, but it's still like, I think it's just making sure women have the resources to know that it's possible to do both, like to have a family and be a mom, and also be a director or do things like that, that exclude you all of a sudden from that possibility in life. Like deciding that you want a family won't
hinder you.
yeah.
Nice. That's inspiring because for me, it looks like only super women can do that, but there are so many great role models in animation. I guess tangentially, what you made me think of, oh darn, yes, that not all directors have the same personality. When I didn't work in animation yet, the directors that I would see getting interviewed for film and for animation had very big personalities, very flashy, very loud, and I'm not like that. But now that I work in animation, I've met all kinds of different directors. You don't have to have like one personality or fit one mold. There are many different styles that work, so you can do it, and if you're in a hiring position, don't count somebody out because they don't have that personality. It's not that big of a deal. In terms of keeping the doors open and opening them wider, just making things available on the internet as often as possible, education, mentorship, job opportunities, because it's extremely restrictive to only have opportunities in expensive cities like Los Angeles or schools in the US. And we're missing out on a lot of really great voices whenever we restrict things by cost or geographic location or language.
Can I speak to that a little bit?
Of course.
One thing I'll echo with Natalie, we get asked a lot of students, I think, feel like because they don't have access to a CalArts, which is ridiculously expensive nowadays, or some of the bigger studios, that they have no opportunities. And the fact is, as Natalie said, there's so many training programs online, like Animation Mentor. You can, for a fraction of the cost, you can get one-on-one attention from someone who is in the industry working. You can meet with groups. You can download software for a really inexpensive price and learn almost anything now, and get jobs in the industry. In fact, some of our animators at Dreamworks, they came straight off from Animation Mentor, straight into being animators on a big feature film. So there are opportunities. That's important to say, because I think a lot of people feel like in the United States, if you come from the Midwest, you feel like that. And I know if you are from a different country where you're not near an animation school, you feel like you might have to, do that, but you don't.
And I think the dialogue, especially around Natalie's story, is important about pivoting, and you're never, there's no stage of your life where your pivoting isn't allowed. I think for a long time, it's like you start out at a certain age and you have to grow, but I think the dialogue around that probably needs to shift. So what are different approaches that we can continue to help people feel like they belong, and the importance, and continuing with the messaging of the importance of belonging? How do we continue with kind of opening those doors?
Do you guys want to start with this one?
Stumped you, finally.
I know. I think sometimes it just goes back to that question we've kind of been, or the statement we've kind of been talking about following your passion, and you'll find a place where you belong as long as you follow that passion. I think, I came from a family where my dad's a doctor, my mom was a nurse, my sister went into law school, and then I announced that I wanted to become an artist. My parents thought I would end up, poor in the street or maybe back at home on their couch for the rest of their life. And but it was the only thing that I knew. Drawing or coming up with ideas was the only thing I could do all day long on a Saturday without stopping or eating or anything. And so I think if you pursue those things that make you happy, that you have passion for, whether you're pivoting out of a career, we all know many people actually have pivoted, from being like an engineer into animation. Whether you're pivoting or whether you're just starting out and you think, oh gosh, is animation really gonna work out for me? I think you have to ask yourself, what do you want to do with your life? What do you have the passion to do all day long? And what gives you joy,
I mean, I think if we start generating more projects that are from a different perspective, then it gives people the hope that, like their stories are important, I think, and whether that inspires them to go into something else or it inspires them to go into animation because they realize it's a vehicle for expressing themselves. I think that'll encourage a broader range of people because they'll feel like it's for them, as opposed to if it just stayed the same, you know, people might not be as interested. But I think as long as people see that their stories and their selves are included in what we're showing, then I think that'll help from just the beginning.
If you have a story that feels a little bit outside of the box or a little fringe, but it's true to you, remember that it's not just for you, that it empowers people to be a little bit more them, that it can open doors just by you saying something that is true for you or like a little bit outside of the mainstream. It opens doors for other people to go further, so please do it.
And there's no better time in history, I think, where there's access to these kinds of shows that could potentially come out, different role models, different types of stories, diversity. There's so much streaming going on right now, so many different platforms, so I think it's perfect time in history to do what they're talking about.
Can you guys give examples of your particular studios of initiatives centered around cultivating a sense of overall belonging?
Well, for us, I mean, what's really exciting, I think, on even just the film that I'm working on is Dreamworks is partnering with Pearl Studios. We have an all Asian cast in a big studio feature for the first time. And what was really important to myself was to, I grew up with the princess movies, but I was a tomboy who liked skateboarding. Princesses don't like camping. They don't make tree houses. They don't like getting dirty. And I felt like it was really, really important to create a role model, like the dream role model that I never got. So the hero in our film is really rough and tumble, and a tomboy leaps before she looks and is the initiator for all the movie. And so as long as we keep looking for those opportunities to provide great role models for everyone, I think that we'll keep making people feel like they belong and they can relate.
I mean, for me personally, it's just I feel like I'm in a place where I'm being allowed the freedom to do something that is so, like, just, I wouldn't have been able to do anything that's different at another studio. I don't know about every other creator, because each creator has their own thing that they're doing, but I do appreciate that there's a wide range of things that feel like somebody's taking a chance on them and letting somebody try to, letting a team of people truly figure out how to do different things. So I think that's generally how my studio's been handling it.
At Disney, they like to say a good idea can come from anywhere, and a couple concrete examples of that are after the internal screenings, anyone can give a note, and the director reads that and takes it into consideration. So, good ideas for the movies can really come from anywhere in the studio, regardless of who you are or which department you work in. And the other example is really self-serving. It's the reason that I'm at Annecy. We're presenting 3 short films from a new project called Short Circuit. And the submissions for those shorts are blind. So they take the name off of the submission, they take the department off of the submission, and the shorts that have come out of that program are really cool and different because, Jerry Wynn is presenting one this weekend, and he's a general TD. Brian Menz is presenting one, and he's an animator, and normally there isn't as much of a pipeline to directing from those departments as there is from story. But when we took everyone's names and departments off of the submissions, you really saw the best ideas were coming from all over the studio. So that was really nice.
That's fantastic. And I thought you were Tracy for a minute. I was like, I'll wrap up.
It's worth also adding, I think there is a little bit of a misconception in the industry that that studios won't, how do they find ideas, that they have a little group of ideas that represents their studio and they won't look outside the box. But I've found it most every studio I work at, and definitely at Dreamworks, there is an openness to hear new ideas, to actually find a way to pitch them. You might get turned down, but that's the risk we all take putting ourselves out there, but it's always worth finding an avenue at your studio where you can pitch something, and you never know what's going to happen.
Well, thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
We have 5 minutes, and so we can open up the room for some questions, unless we solved it all for you Kit, today. We solved it. Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.